everyone, and welcome to Monday, the 17th of February's edition of the Presence Posse Presents. We have almost a full house today with Bobby Cobb, Danielle McMahon, Jan Hart, and me, Miriam Siegel. And we're going to be talking about presence and expression. Presence and expression. What in heaven's name do we mean by that? And actually, if I recall correctly, it was Bobby and Danielle who suggested the topic, right? Do I remember correctly?
Okay.
Or at least the trilogy.
Either one of you want to say something while I just double check the tech?
I'll say a little.
Dude, say something.
Something.
Yeah, I think that one of the ways that I like to check and see how present I am is how much I feel the need to edit what it is that I am interested in expressing. And it's an interesting little kind of it feels like a little guidepost that when I feel myself needing to edit, worried about how people are going to receive what I'm saying, that's a pretty good sign that I'm personally spending a little bit too much time in my head. I'm over analyzing everything, and I just find when I do that, it pulls me right out of presence and pulls me into a story. So that I mean, we'll get more into it, but I feel like our ability to express ourselves freely is a lot more wide open when we are completely present, completely in the moment, completely in the space that I like to call our divinity, our divine I am.
Anybody else?
Jen was taking notes over there.
I was trying to put a background on my screen. I wasn't quite
It's actually really funny. Well, she was not present. No, I'm just kidding.
We're so bare. I was trying to put something up.
We were actually talking about backgrounds before we started the talk, at least Danielle and I, because I had a meeting on a different platform last week, I think it was, where I put a background in. And for some reason, when I logged on to StreamYard, it had that background. It kept the background. And I couldn't figure out how to get rid of it because I didn't need it. So it took me a moment. So and now you're frantically looking for a way. And I suppose I could give you some tips. We could do tick.
It's interesting because as I look at my walls right now, it's just a clean slate. So
yeah,
that's good. And it kind of ties in with presence and expression, because when I express from that deeper part of myself, it's fresh and new, and it's not clunky like the language that comes from my head. I'm doing a lot of writing at the moment, and it's so different what will end up on a page if it's coming from my intelligence versus when it's coming from a settled space of presence. It's much more eloquent, it flows, it's gentle, it's soft. Whereas what comes from here tends to be more jarring, and the language isn't as soft. It just feels clunkier when I look at it. So I know straight away which expression I want to put out into the world. I have zero interest in sharing what's coming from my little computer brain. But I'm really keen to share what comes and gets expressed from that space of presence. I'm part of Jamie Smart's Clarity Tribe. And one of the things we're exploring at the moment is, rather than what do I want or what's my heart's desire, what is it that life wants to express through me right now? And presence is key when it comes to that. Because in my experience, anyway, unless I am fully present, the lines aren't clear in terms of what wants to get expressed through me. And yet, when I am, there's no mistake, there's no confusion. It's crystal clear. So they'd be my initial thoughts on expression and presence.
May I play with you a little bit?
Oh, please.
Thank you. I heard you say something about the difference between expression from, and I'm paraphrasing, expression from presence and expression from, I think you used the expression, my little mind. Something like not interested in what my little mind has to say, or something in that direction.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to play a little bit because to me, it sounds like a judgment.
It's a preference. I have spent decades sharing from what's stored in my intellect. And it's not that it's not useful or helpful, but it's not fresh and new. And it doesn't have the same flavor and tone. It's just not as attractive or enticing to me. So I'm not negating or judging what's in my computer brain. It's very useful. It gets me through a lot of my days. But in terms of what I want to express into the world and what I want to share into the world going forward, I'm more interested in what comes from that place of presence. I guess that would be the distinction.
Does it feel like one is, now this is kind of a weird way to put it, I guess, not to judge it, but because we're often talking about a true self or a true essence. And so the question may seem a bit ambiguous, but does it feel like the one is more you and the other is less you, or is it just different aspects of you?
Maybe both. I do think that, little human Jan is the interface between the spiritual aspect of me and this world that I live in. So it's definitely an aspect of me. I also think there's conditioning in there and programming and learned behavior and all that. And that's okay too. That got me through life as well, a lot of that. And it was the best I could, and I'm still alive. So none of it is bad, but it's just what comes from presence and what gets expressed from presence is juicier.
And when you say juicier, you mean more alive?
More alive. Definitely. There's more aliveness in it. So it does feel like not even my true nature, but coming from that great reservoir of wisdom and knowledge that we're all tapped into.
So, and thank you for playing with me. When I think about the topic, presence and expression, I think my experience of hearing you is that you very eloquently illustrated two different forms of expression that are both coming from you, but maybe different levels of you or places of you, or as you say, the one in it from the main reservoir, because either way, you're the vessel. So from you or through you, it's still, we could say, aspects of you. And they're, I think, from my experience, both are incredibly valuable in different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. And my attention's going to Danielle because you have I'm imagining you recognize yourself in what Jan's been describing, and also you call yourself a people whisperer, but you're a horse person as well. Horse whisperer, horse, you work a lot with horses. And that's another kind of expression. And I'm wondering, is there anything you'd like to say about that? And what that's like for you? Oh, no, you're muted. Hang on.
Okay, try again. I certainly recognize myself in what Jan described. There are moments when you find it most useful to express through that intellect, and moments when it's much more not even useful, but fun, joyful to express from the essence or the heart, or right. But with interacting with horses, as humans, we almost assume that tone of voice is understood by other humans. And tone of voice is not necessarily understood by horses. They understand it a little differently. If it's loud and high pitched, they're more likely to be energized by it. And if it's a lower pitch, they're more likely to be soothed by it. So often I hear people interacting with horses as if they're young children. And so they use what I call baby talk, right, with their horses to express their affinity for them or whatever, right? And I'm like, they're not children. They are grown beings. Talk to them like a grown being, because I feel like it's disrespectful. And I don't know that they take it that way, but I take it that way, right? So how much of that is me putting onto the horse? It depends on what I see in the reaction of the horse. If I see that the horse is really showing me irritation, then I know that I'm okay to say that. Right. Like if it's not, then I should just keep my expression to myself and let those two go about their expression to one another. But a lot of what's expressed to horses also is in body language. It's not verbally, right? They are going to read your body language as well as the energy that you bring, and often the expression that you hope to bring to the interaction is not what they sense. So it can be a good mirror in that if, for instance, you're talking baby talk to your horse and you think that that's something that will be that will land well for them, and you're not getting that reaction, then there's a reason.
Mm.
So it's either in you or it's in them or it's in the interaction. So then we can sort that out and learn to express in a way that they understand. And the more that I've been around them, the more that I'm able to just quickly understand them. And I see this in my husband a lot. Like he was sitting in the living room today and looking out the window at the horses and said, they're just walking around like they're mad. Well, it's, minus 20 and the wind and the snow's blowing and they just appear irritated at him. Now I know he's irritated with it, and I don't know how much the horses are irritated with it, but they may well be that he can just pick that up because he's been around horses nearly as long as I have now, and you learn their expressions, right? So, But what I was going to say about the trilogy was the trilogy, right? This is the third episode of the trilogy. So we did presence and imagination, and presence and creativity, and now we're doing expression. And Bobby was the only one that knows what they discussed.
On the first one, yeah, he and Fred, yeah.
Imagination.
Right.
So maybe Bobby can bring us up to speed with the first step of our trilogy.
Well, I think everybody who has commented is absolutely spot on. It's about uh, what wants to be getting in tune with what wants to be expressed through us. And I do this in trance work a lot. And in fact, the way that Jan is expressing it is kind of how I use it as the fourth inquiry. You know, if I've got somebody in trance and we're exploring some phase of inquiry, we're going within them to find out what it is that their emotions are wanting to tell us. Almost always the first answer that people give, you know, if I say, what's going on? What are you noticing? I get a very intellectual narrative filled with a lot of judgment. And what feels to me like both, it feels to me when I'm expressing it myself and when I'm hearing other people express it through the trance work, is the conditioning is the old stuff. You know, the first thing that comes out is our conditioned mind. Have we been taught that that's good or bad, holy or evil, useful or not useful, right or wrong? And I'm always hoping to bring people beyond that. And the first two checks is to check, what would your heart like to express? And then the next check is, what would your gut like to express? If viewed through the prism of an open heart or an intuitive gut, your gut mind, how does what you have just intellectually described show up for you? And then the fourth one is the perspective of infinite mind, or what is the universe attempting to express through you in this moment? So I guess we talked about it in two different ways. We talked about it like, what is being expressed when we are in a flow state, which to me just signifies that we're in a state where we are grounded, we're centered, we're aligned. And it's kind of like the universe is using us as the tool for manifesting what the universe wants brought into the world. And that has a very, very different feel to it. And just in terms of inquiry, and like with Danielle, you know, with her husband, you could ask, well, what is your heart telling you that the horses are really feeling? What does your gut tell you? And it's very common, at least during trance work, that those three answers or four answers, if we go that deep, are completely different. And each are unique expressions of, you know, what we're looking to make manifest out in the world. And a lot of insights kind of fall out of the tree as a result of that. You know, it's just like we're trained to view the world through just the prism of the conditioned mind. And suddenly, when we start looking at some of these other quote unquote expressions, if we want to use that version of the term, it's filled with insights. And really, I think, you know, we can ease into a flow type state pretty easily by just sort of following our heart space and not intellectually analyzing, but really sitting with our emotions, like Fred had us do when we did that his bliss technique of, you know, just seeing somatically, how do these emotions feel inside of you? What are you noticing about them? And if you view the world from the perspective of that emotion, what is it seeking to express? And just a very different way of viewing the moment in front of us. And, you know, to the degree that we understand and that we talk about and that we teach, that we're never mad at the moment in front of us. When we do get angry, we typically are getting angry because of the story that we're telling ourselves about the moment that's in front of us. And I find checking in with heart mind and gut mind and infinite mind is a very easy way to bring some fresh perspectives to the party, and those fresh perspectives often lead to insight. So I kind of think of it in two ways. I don't know if I added clarity or if I just muddied the waters, but that's kind of what we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago, whenever that idea was downloaded.
Well, I won't speak for the others, but it seemed very clear to me, and I actually find it really interesting, which I'll use an expression, considering its presence and expression, of which eyes am I seeing through. So you're using heart mind, I would say perhaps heart eyes, but it's the same kind of thing. It's whatever is going on. What is my mind telling me? Like what do I see through my mind? Because what my mind is telling me will color what I see, will influence what I see and how I express myself in that moment. What's going on in my heart, how my heart sees through those eyes, that will also color my expression. My gut, those eyes will color. That's what I can see because my gut is seeing. And then the universe sees. And as an expressive arts psychotherapist, this is very exciting because I can choose a form that seems to, I guess I could say, fit the expression of each voice. And I can have them express themselves separately or communicate with each other. And I find that a lot of times when I have people express from, for example, their heart or their gut, I will get a response, I don't feel anything. I don't know. And often my response will be, well, actually, you're the only one who does know. But, but the idea is if you're not used to noticing and knowing whose eyes you're seeing through or what that feels like, it may take a while to discern between the eyes, to put it that way. And discernment is incredibly interesting, I think, and exciting when it comes to expression. Because there's also the discernment that comes into play that allows us to see the inner eye, which voice, what is coloring what we see, and how we can choose. That we can choose. Like which story is running, if there is a story, or is there no story? We like to believe there's no story when we're expressing through the universe's eyes, for example. But that in itself is a story. That's the eyes I'm seeing through. So the opportunity for expression that is connected, I would call it, where the different eyes are in communication and in connection and then express. That's very exciting. And then the awareness around that I find very exciting. And it's sort of a wholeness to it, because we will often talk about the mind or the heart or the gut or the universe, but it's all us. It's all connected. So it's becoming aware of the connection and what shows up then, what needs to be expressed or what is to be expressed then. And we're done today. Did y'all go into your minds or out of your minds?
But I was actually thinking very similar kind of thing. I did a fairly recent post about bringing your entire self to something. And that's not, I don't find it easy to do, right? Like you have to be aware of all of those aspects to even begin to get them all in the same spot at the same time, right? Like if I'm not aware of what conditioning is playing, then it'll just take over, right? Like if I'm not aware of what my heart or my gut are adding to the conversation, it may all be there, but there's a sense of I'm not aware of it, so how can I entirely be there? Does that make sense? Yeah. So that being integral, perhaps having all of those awarenesses be in your expression is something, again, we talk about this a lot. It takes practice, right? We have presence practices for this reason, so that we can begin to be present with the present moment, but also with all the aspects that are in that present moment.
And isn't it interesting? Sorry, go ahead, Jan.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly that, and since I forgot to put my name up last time, I'll do it now, that we practice sometimes to get to a point, if there is an intention, to get to a point where we aren't aware anymore. Like we don't need to be aware of that. So it's like when you brush your teeth, you're not thinking about how, you're just brushing your teeth. Or when you're driving, after a while, you don't think about how, you just know. So this idea of practicing presence becomes, and the kind of awareness around practicing becomes not awareness, if you understand what I mean, because we don't have to practice anymore. We are, if that makes any sense. There becomes a point where we no longer focus on how, on doing the practice, and we just are. Go ahead, Jan, please.
Something similar, I think, to what you're saying. And I think definitely, yes, there's practice for integration and awareness and raising our consciousness of what's going on. And yet, all of us and all of everything is always there in every moment, whether we're aware of it or not. And it reminds me of, I think you were laughing a minute ago, Bobby. Sydney Banks used to talk about the nothingness, the isness, and the allness, which is another headbender. But you know, the nothingness is just that universal mind, and the isness is everything in form, including the power of thought once it turns into thought. And the allness is the nothingness and the isness. So the formless and the form. So all aspects of the whole are always present. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And, you know, I think we can get stuck in, it's easiest to get stuck in our conditioning because that's the one that people have been pushing us toward, and we've been pushing ourselves toward. but like that moment that we can brush our teeth without thinking about it, or we can brush our teeth while we're reading an email or a text message from somebody else, and we can turn that completely over to autopilot, or we can have the option of being 100% completely mindful and noticing the toothbrush on our gums and each and every tooth and kind of where it's there. So we've always got the ability to shift from one perspective to another. And just as we're talking about this, I'm kind of thinking that in and of itself can be an interesting like little check to see how present we are. You know, like when people meditate, if I'm guiding meditation, I always say begin by taking conscious control of your breath and let that become a trigger for your body, mind, spirit to align and ground and come into this present moment and feel the air coming in and feel the stress going out. But most of the breaths that we take during the course of a day, we never give any thought to them at all. You know, I think we always have the ability to turn something completely over to autopilot, which that has a very different feeling to me of being in a flow state. I mean, they both feel automatic, but a flow state to me kind of feels like we are being led. I'm captivating at least one mind here. She's like, Daddy, you're so on today. So, and you know, checking in with ourselves to kind of see, are we doing this mindlessly? Could we put a little bit more heart into it? What does our intuitive mind tell us? What would the universe like us to be expressing in this moment? And it just creates room. I think it creates the potential that we're not simply doing the activity that we're doing the way that we've always done it, the way that's the most efficient, and, you know, with our mind kind of going off in different directions. You know, having that ability to find out, is there a specific finite aspect of myself that is being expressed now, which to me, when I check in with that, I'm mainly looking to see, is this me or is it just my conditioning? Is this just what I've been taught by society is the appropriate response in this moment? And if I actually dial in and check in with my intuitive mind and all of the other aspects, do things look different? And if things look different, does that create more choice and give me a little bit more flexibility in the way that I interact in this moment? I had a situation yesterday where we've been having these weekly meetings on Sunday, and somebody who has been ill, no fault of their own, hasn't been able to be at the last 3 meetings. And there was a moment that I found myself getting irritated, and that we were having to explain things that we had dug deeply into over the last 3 weeks. And just that irritation became enough of a pattern interrupt that I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Why, this person is a lovely person. They haven't been here for 3 weeks. Why in the world is this irritating me? And it was just that there was like a little resentment that we were having to go back over and review for somebody that hadn't been there. And the moment that I realized that, I just simultaneously recognized the absurdity of it. And, we've got the time to review, and it's helpful to review. other people were not here as well. And it just immediately I found an immediate shift in, I could hear that that expression of irritation creeping into my voice, and I was aware enough to say, "Wow, why? Where's this coming from?" And it just seemed out of place, and it was enough of a pattern interrupt to go do just like a little check-in to go, "Where's this coming from?" And it was me, as it almost always is when I'm checking in on myself. It's me wrestling with the way that life is unfolding. And I have ideas about the way that I would like it to unfold that I think are better, or at least more preferential to the mental state that I'm in. But checking in and just noticing that allowed for a completely different and a much more loving expression to flow through. And it felt better. I mean, the moment that I made that shift, irritation doesn't feel good. It's an uncomfortable feeling by design. It's designed to get our attention and notice what's going on here and explore.
You bring up an interesting point for me, and I'm imagining for other people, because this idea of, if I call it that, idea of being present and aware, that involves not resisting the moment, can be easily misunderstood. And the way you describe it, I find myself noticing that there is no moment that is uncomfortable. If I speak generally, if there's no moment that is uncomfortable unless I resist it. And I thought you illustrated that actually very well. And I think a lot of people don't understand that a moment or a situation is uncomfortable, not because it's uncomfortable, but because you're resisting it. And that's when the discomfort shows up. If it was like, well, this is life, this is what is right now. It's like the moment I accept everything exactly as it is, it's not uncomfortable. It just is. And I will notice whether I am more or less present, more or less resisting, to the degree that I feel discomfort in the situation or in connection with the situation. When I remove the resistance, there's the flow and not the autopilot, as you say, because autopilot I would consider to be an unconscious expression, whereas flow is more of an expression of awareness, in my experience anyway. It's like letting go of control and being present to what is. Autopilot is kind of like no control and no presence in a way.
Yeah.
I like where you're going, Miriam, and
I like
I
that
think
too.
a lot of the discomfort that we hear about people feeling in the world right now is resistance to the way the world is right now.
Yeah. We put judgments on the way we think it's supposed to be,
Yeah.
and then we don't really see necessarily. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And even if we do see, it's back to what Bobby was saying, if we can not put the story on it, then we don't necessarily resist it. I had two very contrasting experiences just recently. One was in a work setting where I lost my presence, and like Bobby, I got very frustrated with somebody and something that was going on. It wasn't what was going on, it was I knew better. But like Bobby, the discomfort woke me up to what was going on very quickly. And when I ask, where is my experience coming from now, I know the answer isn't from her across the table. And the other experience, we lost one of our doggies last week. But there was no resistance. she had a series of strokes over a 24-hour period, God love her, and there just wasn't any coming back from it. And it was more about meeting the moment and embracing it and caring her and making her as comfortable as possible, and looking after her until that moment came where we had to say goodbye. And there was no resistance. There was just pure presence and love. And she died, but we had a beautiful experience.
Hmm. Hmm. Death is also an expression, and the process of dying is also an expression. And the process of being with someone who is dying is an expression. And it's like there's no instruction manual. There's no right or wrong way. And I recall Eckhart Tolle even, and y'all know I like him, talking about his experience of losing someone, where he went through grief. And the underlying understanding of grief as an expression of love. And trying to hide or stop grief is actually getting in the way of love. Because we think grief, because it's sad, there must be something bad about it, or it doesn't feel good. Well, especially if you're resisting it, but even so, it's not the same. It's not an unhealthy expression. It can become unhealthy if it gets stuck. Like if we stay there, then we're in a story, as we would often say, and we're rolling that story. But the actual expression of love can be in many ways, and grief is one of them. But it doesn't mean that everybody experiences grief when someone passes away, as you have beautifully illustrated.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I noticed my response to your talking about it was, And I realized that I'm assuming that you are in pain in some way because you've lost your dog. That was my assumption, and I didn't.
Well, yeah,
notice
it's
right away.
bittersweet. There's joy, there's pain, she's at peace, she's in a good place. She had a great life. She had 15 great years and one bad day, and I hope I go the same way. One bad day is all right. But yeah, we miss her, and her brother is circling the house looking for her still, which is interesting. And the treats, half of them are left on her bed still.
Oh yeah.
So they grieve in a different way. It's all love, as we said. Yeah. Anyway.
There's something about expression and allowing expression and being present to expression, not judging it, not try to change it, but just knowing that it's movement. That's all it is. It's movement. It's my being meeting whatever is in the moment and expressing my being in that moment. And I mean, we could get into deep discussions about the one and the two and the three even. Or we were even talking about four. But it is, as we understand it, we're all made up of the same energy as everything else. It's being expressed differently. So how it's expressed in me, as me, through me, won't be the same as for you, Bobby, or Jan, or Danielle. And so my experiences and my expression of my experiences are not to be judged as right or wrong, good or bad, but just what is.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons I'm mentioning it is, since we were talking about grief, and I've seen this happen with others as well. When my father passed away, we had this one day we were telling all his jokes. I think it was like 4 or 5 days after he died, and we were telling all this jokes. We were laughing so hard. And it was a celebration and also an expression of love and grief. He wasn't there to tell the jokes, but we were, and they were still fun. I mean, it was still bad. It was still really funny and really bad because they were horrible jokes, right? But my mother at one point said something like, "Good thing we're not at a restaurant, or if anybody saw us now, they think we were disrespectful," or something like that. And I thought about that because I couldn't find anything wrong with it. It was just what was. And I think as I sort of look at that as we're talking about expression and grief or not, or the death of someone, it is what it is. And it's expressed through whoever is, perhaps you could say, that aspect of the divine that is each and every one of us. And in that respect, I notice curiosity awakening in me, not judgment. And I consider that, I find myself feeling gratitude, being grateful for that. It's like, who are you? Like, what is this divine spark that is coming through you, that is being expressed through you? And I'm like you, Bobby, every once in a while. Because that's also part of it. But isn't it kind of cool to not judge and just be with? I don't know. I just felt like sharing that. Yes, Kobe-wan, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'm, to the degree that like a mindfulness practice is just being, just harmonizing with whatever is showing up and not, like to the best of our ability, not wrestling with reality as it's unfolding. And like there's one level of looking at that where you can see, like you can make an assumption, you can have a belief that, if I'm present, then the moment is not going to bother me. And the ego can very much like want to mask that. Like, so if the irritation is arising, ego would say, "Oh, you are representing awake awareness, and therefore you don't have bad moments like that." And it wants to stick up the mask. But if you're truly not resisting anything, then that seems to me that means you also are not resisting anger or anxiety or grief or sadness or any of the emotions that we've been taught to perceive as negative emotions. And like, I say on probably every podcast, rumble strips on the highway of life, that our so-called negative emotions are really whispers of wisdom telling us about our relationship to the present moment and giving us a chance to reharmonize or reintegrate or just turn to presence and experiencing that. And the moment, I mean, so often it seems like that once somebody gets an insight or an aha moment or a flash of intuition that comes in and shows them the reason that you've been frustrated is you have been looking at this through a very, very limited, very finite prism. And if you look at the bigger picture, all of that resistance often, not always, but very often just melts away. It just dissolves because it was all based on a, fear that the acronym false evidence appearing real. We were buying into this story that this thought that we're clinging on to actually means something. And it's just energy, it's all, to the degree that we can see, it's all just energy. And be present to our relationship with it. How are we relating to the present moment? Are we in the flow or are we resisting? And that often is kind of a binary choice. And it just, it's like signals from our inner GPS, at least it seems to me.
Yeah. What's the program, as you call it, conditioning? We program our GPS, or do we just let our GPS guide us? That's an interesting trip. Do you all ever have the experience or the inner experience of, I'm on the presence posse, I have to pull myself together, like, or in a situation where I've just lost the plot? Have you ever I think actually you've talked about this, Bobby, a couple of times, where it's like you got upset with somebody on the phone or something like that, and you've said something like, I'm on the presence posse, I should be able to.
I should know better.
Yeah.
I should be superhuman.
That is the voice of ego speaking loudly and clearly.
I had
nice to know it's still there and healthy.
Yeah. I mean, to me, when I catch myself doing that, and I do that, when I catch myself, that's a cause for a pause, for me to just say, okay, what's going on here? Why is ego feeling the need to rear its ugly head? And just to really sit with what is for a moment, and to, shift perspective, rather than, like, if we're frustrated, our mind immediately goes to, what should I do here? Why is this happening? What does it mean? Am I safe? What should I do? Yeah. Those are the questions that it just wants to come out. But another great question to ask, which is a good inquiry question, is, what am I missing? That everything's fine. I'm in a good place. I'm nice and warm. I'm not hungry. I feel safe. Yet this frustration is arising. What am I missing? What am I overlooking? And it's just a good opportunity to check in and to return to presence. That's normally a signal that we've gotten lost in the story, and we're swept up in the story that's unfolding, and we don't like that. And our bodily energy is saying, tapping us on the shoulder, you're doing it again. You've gotten lost in the illusion. Come back home. Come back to me.
I love that question, Bobby. Anyway. I often use that in conflict situations, or, in mediation. People are banging the table and stomping their feet, and I'm right, and I know, and it's this and it's that. And it's like, what is it that you don't know? What's the piece of the puzzle that you don't have?
Yeah.
I have all the pieces. Well, what piece could there be that you might not have? But it takes a lot for people to look in that direction sometimes. It can be a big ask.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's a great question.
I love it. There are so many opportunities for opening questions. Like, if somebody is disagreeing, it's like, what do you think that person is seeing? Okay, and what do you think that person is not seeing? Or what do you think that person is not hearing of what you're saying? There are so many possibilities for opening, which is a way of saying getting more present, like opening up to something else, when an expression can be kind of like tunnel vision.
Mhm.
It's kind of locked. And then we kind of invite presence into the mixture. It's like, what do you notice? It can be so magic.
It can. I mean, I think particularly when people are in difference, where they're not present, people can be very quick and willing to do harm to the other
Mm.
in their own defense. And by inviting presence with those opening questions, we invite people to reflect and express from a different aspect, from their heart or their gut or their infinite. And, without even using those words, we can guide them in a different direction. And, conflict can be an opportunity for understanding and
Mhm.
insight, or it can be trouble.
Yeah.
And presence has a beautiful impact on expression in that space.
Mhm.
So do you ever get to the point where they giggle at themselves the way that we do? Because I like that. I mean, Bobby said it was cause for a pause, but I heard it as cause for a giggle. We all giggled. Marion suggested that, right? Like, yes, we've all been there.
All do
But we
it.
find it amusing, right? It's not something that needs to be judged or criticized or suppressed or masked, right?
I hung up my whip several years ago.
Yay.
Yeah, because I think that happens a lot, right? If I would have listened to that voice at the beginning of the Presence Posse, I wouldn't be here, right? That voice said, you don't know enough. You don't live correctly enough to be on here. Well, I'm practicing. I'm learning. I have things to offer. And I think it was something that just the three of us women did. And it was relationships, I think. And I showed up and I was like, I don't feel like I have anything to share. My relationship sucks. And you guys were like, oh yeah, you do. Come on.
Yeah. Your husband was going through a hard time with his hip at the time.
I
It's in a
don't
bad
even
mood.
remember what it was about at the time, but I do remember like feeling like that I couldn't present, I couldn't express, right? Because I wasn't having success with that particular presence and relationship aspect in that moment. But life is made up of lots of moments. And I've been married for 30 years. So I think we're doing okay. Maybe it was only 25 at that point, but for a while. But I love it when people are able to giggle at that in themselves. Or I have another friend that says she'll catch herself saying something judgmental and she'll go, oh, I love me. And just drop it. Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a teacher who is kind of a bit of a tangent, maybe. He deliberately, in the break, would go out and smoke and make sure people saw, like make sure the students saw him smoking. He was also somewhat overweight, not a lot, but you wouldn't expect it necessarily if you had that sort of idea of what that kind of teacher would look like. And he would go out and he would eat, and sometimes he would eat unhealthy food. And he told me one day that he did it on purpose. He made sure that people saw that he was human. He was like everybody else, because he didn't want people to be putting him on a pedestal. And he knew he couldn't live up to it anyway. So he didn't want to do that to himself either. And I remember when we started the Presence Posse and I was trying to figure out the tech and I was trying to coordinate the tech and talking and noticing who's going to speak and all of this stuff that it's way easier. But at the beginning, it was like, okay, I've never done this before. And have you all heard of Pippi Longstocking. Do you call her Pippi
Mhm.
Longstocking? Yeah. She's a Swedish figure, but she was always in English, but with the wrong lips. Like she would be saying something else. But I didn't watch her a lot when I was a kid. But having moved to Norway, all the kids grow up with her. And one of the things she does is she says, "I've never done this before, so I'm got to be good at it." And I kind of looked at the tech that way, and like the coordination of being the MC. It's like, well, there's only one way to go from not knowing, and that is knowing a little bit at a time, which means I'm going to be good at it. Because I didn't know then, and then suddenly I knew, and what I knew, well, that's good. And that's kind of been the whole way along. It's like, it doesn't always work, and I don't care. Because it is what it is. It's not about me. It's right.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, it's good, whatever it is. And I kind of like that. I think they're a bit lucky, the ones that grew up with that.
Yeah.
I have never done this before, so of course I'm going to be good at it. It's still mind, but it's kind of like the optimism that's in every moment, because there's always a possibility in the moment. So I see it like that. It's like somebody embracing the possibility. From here, there's only onward to go, right? I just really like that. So yeah, I still have my whip every once in a while. I haven't put it completely down. Yeah. And sometimes it's useful, actually. Is there anybody who would like to share anything? Have you got something going on, or you'd like to make a final point about presence and expression before we end the session today? End the talk? The session. We're all coaches, right? End the talk. Who'd like to go first? Or is there nobody who has anything?
I'm good.
Yes,
I
you
just
are.
want the winter to end.
Oh.
I'm looking forward to doing retreats and workshops and things in better weather, but not when it's this cold. Of course, we're always available. All of us can be reached on the Presence Posse. Our information's there. And if you would like to work with us, you can reach out. I think all of us probably do a clarity call or something.
Mm-hmm. I'll also do, because I use a lot of action methods, not always, but often. You get kind of a demo with me because you can't talk about that stuff. Action methods imply that you actually have to do something, but it's doing presence, right? There's a difference between doing on autopilot or doing without presence and being in your doing. And you get to experience some of that. But Bobby, did you have anything you want to?
I've got an interesting new project that I'm working on, using our emotions. It's really, I've kind of taken Fred's bliss technique and turned that, kind of blended it with a Byron Katie style self-inquiry thing. And I'm going to be releasing a class, I hope here pretty quickly, that will be self-guided and allow you to go and explore different parts of it, self-paced on your own little bit. And I will have a public announcement about that in the Presence Posse page when it goes live, which I'm thinking is going to be in about a week or two. So stay tuned for that if that's of interest to you.
Very cool. You can put it in the group too.
Yeah,
Okay, in the group.
I will.
And all our contact information is in there. So if anybody wants to get in touch with us. You can either watch the replay of this or go into the group, and you can find our contact information there. I'm going to mention something quickly that I forgot, actually. I'm offering a new thing, and it is a completely new thing. I have actually not even talked about this ever. I do healing drawing. It's a bit of a, I don't know how to talk about it, but anybody who's done a healing session with me where I use my innate ability to bring healing energy, put it that way, or be a vessel for healing energy, will know that I move quite a bit. And what I do when I do healing drawing is I draw the healing, like the healing patterns, I guess patterns is one way to put it. The trajectories of the energy, and it ends up in a drawing that you can actually use and build on to continue your healing on your own between sessions. And I have now launched this brand new thing. I've been drawing for years and not knowing what to do with it. And then I just kind of went, just do it. So now I'm doing it. And so the first 5 people who book a session for what I'm calling soul, it's channeled healing. So it's channeled soul connection healing. The first 5 people to book a session get a really, really reduced rate. And then after that, it goes up to half price. And then at the end of the month, or we'll say the beginning of March, it goes up to full price. So if you're really curious, I would say grab one of those first 5 because it's really inexpensive. And then give it a shot. And if you want some more information, that's my contact information, and let me know. So that's me. It has been lovely being with you, and it still is. And we don't know if we'll be back next week because generally I'm the one doing tech and I actually have to work. So we may be back next week, and we may be back in 2 weeks, depending if somebody else can do tech. And we will let you know on our page and in our group when the next roundtable talk will be. And you are welcome to be present, to looking forward to the next Presence Posse talk. Thank you, Bobby Cobb, Danielle McMahon, Jan Hart, and everyone else who has been watching or who watches the replay. And of course, as always, you are welcome to ask us questions and comment afterwards, and we'll get back to you. Take good care, everyone, and stay present.
Thanks.